Buonasera a tutti. Good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome new listeners. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo. Grazie per essere con noi anche oggi, mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome back Marianna Gatto, a historian and expert on Italian-American history, especially in Los Angeles. Marianna serves as the executive director and co-founder of the Italian-American Museum of Los Angeles, where she has led efforts to preserve and celebrate Italian-American culture and heritage since 2010. Her latest book, The Italian Americans of Los Angeles, A History, offers a groundbreaking and in-depth look at these often overlooked communities' rich contributions to the city's development over the past 2 centuries. Drawing from meticulous research and over 100 rare images, Marianna brings to life the artists, pioneers, agriculturalists, and dreamers who helped shape Los Angeles into the vibrant metropolis we know today. We're excited to hear more about her work and insights into the legacy of Italian Americans in Southern California. Ma prima, pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring in person or online to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. Benvenuta Marianna, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Oh, well, you know that I'm a big fan of your work, and I'm always amazed that we saw each other just a few weeks back in DC. How you transition from glamorous ball gowns to jeans and a tool belt in an equally fashionable style.
Well, they say variety is a spice of life. And, next year will be 20 years working on the museum project for me, 15 years as the museum's director. And there's been so many amazing experiences and lots of adventures, good, bad, otherwise. But you definitely never have a chance to get bored. And I'm grateful for that.
And yes, you're a true Renaissance woman. And kind of, I usually ask this question at the end, but I really want to devote this conversation to your beautiful publication, The Italian Americans of Los Angeles. So going back to that jeans and tool belt, what are you opening? You know that it's amazing exhibit.
Yes, we just closed our exhibition about Louis Prima. And we are opening an exhibition, a brand new original temporary exhibition, created in-house by us, called Creative Minds, Italian American Inventors and Innovators. And it looks at just that, the Italian Americans who created items, introduced ideas that have shaped our lives in immeasurable ways. So there's over 100 different inventors and innovators profiled in the exhibition. We do, an exhibition on Italian American inventors, I feel would have been incomplete if we did not, make a nod to the Italian inventors that, everybody from, Da Vinci to Ferragamo. But this exhibition really focuses on those who came to the United States and have changed the way, we think, we eat, we live, so many iconic products.
I would be very curious to see additional pictures on of the exhibit. That's another instance where I wish I were living closer to you. Is already every time your museum puts out a new exhibition is always it's always a treasure. They're always so well curated, so engaging with the community, and so I've seen a Bialetti. I know that probably there is some opera, but go and visit the Italian American Museum of Los Angeles and see for yourself.
And on that note, just in closing, the exhibition will open the 16th of November to the public. It will continue for about 9-10 months at the museum, and then there's already talk about bringing it to Cleveland, so a little bit closer to you.
Wonderful. Mhm.
And as that is confirmed, I'll make sure to keep you posted.
Okay, absolutely. So today's conversation, we will really get to dive into an Italian American community that has made Los Angeles such a vibrant city as we know it, with less known facts and so forth. So the first question is, what inspired you to write this comprehensive history of Italian Americans in Los Angeles?
Well, I mean, I would say two things. First, there's very little scholarship on Italian Americans in Los Angeles, and they are the nation's fifth, depending on how you ask, sixth largest Italian American population. And it's a very old Italian American population. Italians began settling in Los Angeles before there was an Italy, before there was a United States. They first arrived in the 1820s. And just the idea that Italians and Italian Americans have contributed to every aspect of Southern California's development, but it's just very few people are aware of that. It hasn't been, codified. So that was a good part of it, was trying to kind of fill in some gaps in scholarship. But if you go back further than that, I would say my inspiration came, when I was a little kid, and I was trying to figure out how I, as an Italian American, fit into Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and how I, as an Italian American from Los Angeles, fit into Italian America. Because I would also, as a kid, I would go to the library. I was like a voracious reader, and I was looking for answers. So I would check out every book on Italian American topics that I could, and always be looking down for the something about Los Angeles, and there wasn't anything. And so I would always wonder, like, well, how do we fit in here? How do we get here? And so it was really kind of, I think, about assembling a puzzle that also kind of reveals a little bit about me personally as well. So that there you have it in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Obviously, being a historian, there is a lot of research behind this book. It's actually meticulous research and a lot of many previously unpublished images. So, can you share some highlights on your research journey and any surprising discoveries?
Gosh, there have been, so many like exciting moments as a researcher. Um, and I, I guess to begin with, I wrote a book over 10 years ago. It was a little primer on Italian Americans in Los Angeles. And I knew back then that I would be, thank you, yes. I would be writing another one, because there's just so much that I could not share within the confines of that book. And there was so much more that I wanted to, I wanted to be able to speak and write about. So, there's been also, I think sometimes, like, as a historian, I develop a very close relationship sometimes with the people that I'm writing about, some more than others. But I mean, two things come to mind. One, there was this, I speak about her in the book. Her name was Nina Vitaliano, and this is World War I era, before women even have the right to vote. She and a group of women in Los Angeles decide that they want to become automobile racers. And they, have rallies and race, and just kind of discovering this woman's story, really, bringing her to life, and how she also in turn continues to shape the sport today, was one of those, like, very kind of like aha moments. I felt like, you know, uh, I felt like she almost wanted me to tell her story, you know. But there's been other things that I found a lot of kind of nerdy satisfaction in, like, for For instance, there was a largely lost Italian enclave near downtown LA that was mostly Sicilian. And there was a church there that Mother Cabrini would work out of later, and her group of sisters. And this was an Italian parish called Immaculate Conception. And it was, later demolished in an urban renewal, as part of an urban renewal project. And even the Archdiocese in Los Angeles had very few records pertaining to this church. And through my research, I uncovered some. I found some of the sacramental records that were very just a wealth of information. But probably about 3 years ago, I found an image of the church. That was the first image I'd ever seen. And it was like, just such an incredible, like, wow, for me. I mean, again, that sounds rather maybe ridiculous, but when you spend so much time, sometimes I compare chronicling the Italians of Los Angeles to chasing ghosts, because the history wasn't well documented. It wasn't well preserved. Sometimes you're literally pursuing like a footnote of a footnote. And when you make these little discoveries, it can be so exciting.
It is indeed, a lot of people are also, for instance, in doing their genealogy research. It is the same thing when they trace back their ancestors, and then all of a sudden, from nowhere, they get an image of a record and so forth. So I can relate to that ecstasy, so to speak. And in your book, obviously, you explore the roles of Italian Americans in sectors like agriculture, entertainment, and politics. The founding of Little Italy, the Italian whole, faith, tradition, foodways. So, which contribution or period of Italian American history do you think had the most significant impact on the development of Los Angeles, or that people should really concentrate on to
Gosh, that's kind of a hard one, because I almost feel like Italian Americans are still influencing the city. They're still influencing how we live, what we appreciate as beauty. They're still, influencing, they're in leadership roles. So you see them being very influential throughout our history, really, here in Los Angeles, from helping make California the agricultural state that it is. Many people, when we hear about like winemaking, especially in California, you think of Napa. But Los Angeles was actually the state's winemaking capital for much of the 1800s. And it wasn't until really after Prohibition that, the Napa wine industry really becomes closer to what it is today. So you see Italian winemakers in Los Angeles really advancing the industry forward and introducing many crops to the region. It's almost like any field, if you examine it, you'll find Italians who were there shaping it.
And talking about not only the industries, but if we were to look at like specific neighborhoods or areas of Los Angeles, and that shaped the Italian American experience in a way that it might not be widely known, what are maybe some of the streets, buildings, or districts, again, with interesting backstories related to the Italian American history?
Well, many people aren't aware that Los Angeles actually had 6 Little Italies at one time. If you ever visit Los Angeles and you go to Chinatown, that was one of the largest Italian neighborhoods up until really its redevelopment as Chinatown. So there was an earlier Chinatown in Los Angeles, but that was demolished and basically moved to what was then a largely Italian neighborhood. So if you've ever wandered through Chinatown, you're actually in one of what was a historic Italian neighborhood, and there's still remnants of that. St. Peter's Italian Church and Casa Italiana are there. If you go a little further into the adjacent neighborhood of Lincoln Heights, That was once home to thousands of Italian Americans. It was actually where my family settled when they came out here following World War II. And that neighborhood had many interesting personalities, interestingly enough, where it's where the Capra family, as in Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life, where they first settled, where he sold newspapers as a child. And again, if you go into these neighborhoods and you know what you're looking for, there's these clues that reveal its Italian past. For instance, the San Antonio Winery was founded in 1919, still in operation under the leadership of the original Italian family. That remains in the neighborhood. There's a couple delis that are no longer, some of them are no longer Italian owned, but they date back to that era. So there's little clues. But again, to the untrained eye, you often miss them.
It would be almost like in today's age, nice to have a QR code in the window of wherever is a shop that has an oral history linked to the story. Well, you kind of touched it, but I'm interested in finding out more about unique traditions or daily customs that Italian Americans brought with them to Los Angeles. Which might be less documented, or maybe any particular foods, festivals, rituals that developed uniquely in Los Angeles in comparison to maybe other Italian American enclaves elsewhere.
Well, certainly. One of the things that Italian Americans kind of had on their side in Los Angeles, or Italians, I should say, when they came to Los Angeles was, the climate resembles that of Italy in, some parts more than others, obviously, some parts of Italy, that is, more than others. But, they were blessed with like a longer growing season. They were able to do more outdoors. They were able to kind of carry on a lot of their ways. Many of them had come from an agricultural society, and they continued farming. We saw them introduce events like the Vendemmia to Los Angeles, the annual grape harvest, and again, centering around winemaking. They would introduce various saints to the region. Los Angeles was founded as a Catholic city. The full name of Los Angeles is Our Town of Our Lady, the Town of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels. And, whereas Italians faced prejudice as a result of their Catholic faith in other parts of the country, that wasn't so much so in Los Angeles, especially in the early years. So you saw, them kind of transplant a lot of these traditions, the saint procession, for instance. To give you an idea, one of the saints that's been celebrated in Los Angeles for many years is Santa Lucia. And we celebrate her on her, her early December feast day. Which, I told some of my friends in Nebraska about that, and they kind of chuckled like, so wait a minute, let me make sure I understand this. You guys are, out, parading statues in December. Like, what? So, we, in the early days, Italians would bring certain traditions like il tiro del formaggio, the throwing of the cheese, to Los Angeles. So you really saw like a lot of these, these people who had kind of come from a very like peasant background, if you will, make that tradition to like these urban city dwellers, but they maintained a lot of their, their traditions.
Okay.
And
so,
yeah.
Go ahead. So I'm going to go into a couple of commercials, but then I have a few other questions regarding interactions with other communities and adaptation and identity. Applying for Italian citizenship, need documents translation. Istituto Mondo Italiano provides certified translations and assistance services. Be sure to visit us at istitutomondoitaliano.org and schedule your free consultation. Un caffè, per favore. My first cup of coffee sets the tone for my entire day, and I get my coffee at La Prima Espresso. La Prima has been brewing Pittsburgh's best coffee for over 35 years. Try any of their in-house roasted varieties of beans from all over the world at home, or come and enjoy an espresso or a cappuccino at any of their locations, where their friendly baristas and familiar faces will make you feel at home. Visit laprima.com to get La Prima Espresso coffee at your door. So before you mentioned Chinatown, the first iteration was actually on the grounds of the Little Italy. So what was the interaction like with other ethnic groups in Los Angeles? And were there any expected blending? I don't want to say alliances, it's not, or cultural exchanges. That's what I was looking for. That might have shaped the Italian American identity in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so just like everywhere where Italians, were one part of a larger, society where there were, other ethnic groups, you see Italians and Poles, Italians and Irish. In Los Angeles, depending on where which Italian neighborhood or which neighborhood the Italians were living in, they might have had, their neighbors might have been Mexican American. In some parts of the city, they lived very closely with the Japanese community. In other parts, it was Italians and Croatians. So it really depends on kind of like the era and the neighborhood. But in early Los Angeles, certainly, again, Los Angeles being established as a colony of Spain, then it's ruled by Mexico, and then the United States takes over. There was a lot of interaction in the early days with the Mexican-American community. Many of them had been, born in what would become the state of California. So, these are Mexicans, so-called Mexicans before there was a California. So there was a lot of intermarriage in the early days. That was many Italian men would marry up by marrying a Mexican-American woman. That continued, the communities continued to live side by side for decades, and you still see quite a bit of intermarriage between the two. So in short, it really depends on who they were living in and around.
Okay. So as far as the adaptation and identity and maybe the impact of some major events, World War II, Great Depression, specifically for the Italian Americans in Los Angeles, can you tell us if in your research you have seen that they had to modify their identity or practices to fit in the social and economic landscapes of Los Angeles?
Yes, certainly. So, in the early years, as I mentioned, it was easier in some ways to fit in like Mexican Los Angeles as an Italian. You have a similar language, same Catholic faith. But as, Los Angeles becomes more of an American city, as immigration from Italy becomes more Southern Italian, many of the Italians who first settled in Los Angeles were Northern Italian. And as there's, certain like geopolitical events that shape people's perceptions of Italians, certainly during like the first Red Scare in the early, the teens, 20s, you saw some Italians already kind of distancing themselves a bit here in Los Angeles from their identity. There was much more of an emphasis on assimilation, fitting in. But certainly during World War II, when the United States was at war with Italy, when 600,000 Italian Americans who had not become United States citizens are declared enemy aliens. Yeah. And the West Coast is really like the most sensitive military area. So the restrictions on the West Coast are much stricter than elsewhere. You see a lot of Italians here in Los Angeles attempt to appear less Italian. They stop speaking the Italian language. Sometimes Italian organizations closed, or they were forced to close Italian language schools. Many people are only aware of kind of like the idea of Italian Americans or Italians in the past, 20 years or so, the fashionable, but when I was growing up, and certainly my father's generation, it was a little different. You were looked at differently. And so I think, that was the generation who learned how not to be Italian. And we're still, I think, trying to recover from that today in terms of Why did Italians stop speaking their language? Why did Italian Americans stop speaking their language? That is because, our parents, our grandparents experienced those years.
And actually touch upon my next question, which is, again, how the experience of the second and third generation Italian Americans in Los Angeles different from that of the original immigrants. But I was more curious to see if there is anything that is related even to a specific dish or some local slang that people might not recognize that has an Italian origin, or
it's a little bit harder to say. There are some very specific regional sandwiches and things like that. One of the gentlemen who is credited with helping popularize or introduce the chili burger. I don't know how famous those are in Pittsburgh, but in Los Angeles, it's a big thing.
we have the many sandwiches, the sandwich layer with French fries, which is of Italian origin as well. So, but sorry for the interruption.
No. So he was Italian American. His last name was Buscaglia, and he had a little restaurant in Highland Park. There's Los Angeles is also as you're talking, I would say the last even, say 80 years of immigration or migration or transmigration of Italians to Los Angeles. They came from so many different parts of Italy, and they also came from so many different parts of the nation. So you had Italians who might have been living in New York or in Pittsburgh or in Texas or in Louisiana. And, they came to Los Angeles and settled and brought, some of their traditions from not only Italy, but also from what they might have, tastes they might have acquired in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia. So it's I guess it's very mixed. There's few things that I can say at this point that remain that haven't been influenced, that are maybe uniquely Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. So a continuation, so the Italian Americans of Los Angeles, the history. Let's talk about the future. So how do you see the current Italian Americans and their interest in recuperare, to trace back or get interest into their cultural heritage? Do you see a new movement of the younger generation getting curious, as we are experiencing with not necessarily new clubs formation, but more younger people getting involved into what it would have been the older clubs to bring new energy? So I was wondering if you have started to notice something similar on the West Coast.
We do. I mean, I would love to see more of it. I would love to see more interest, but I think there is an awareness that it's up to, our generation, who is still kind of second, maybe even third in pecking order, for some of the, septuagenarians, octogenarians who are still in the leadership positions of these different clubs and organizations. There's, I think, a sense of obligation that if we don't keep it going, it will be gone. And so we do see encouraging, things like one of the gentlemen who was a president of the Santa Lucia Society here in Los Angeles for many years. He passed away, and now his daughter is leading it. So we see definitely some encouraging behaviors. We also see the museum, the Italian American Museum of Los Angeles, kind of being that bridge for different generations to kind of discover their heritage, participate in the community. So yeah, I mean, again, I would love for it to be double what it is, but just the fact that we're still doing this and there's still an effort and interest, I think, is important.
One last question, but again, you can introduce anything else that we haven't touched upon it. But what do you hope the readers, especially those unfamiliar with Italian American history in Los Angeles, will take away from your beautiful publication?
Well, I think, two things. My hope is, okay, the Italian American experiences there's so much diversity within them. We think of it as largely, centered around New York and that area, more or less. And numerically speaking, that's correct. The majority of Italians settled in those places: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago. But if you look at pretty much anywhere in the United States where there was a mine, where there was a mill, where there was a need for workers, because most of our, families came over here as economic refugees, essentially. They were in search of better lives, and they went where there were jobs. And therefore, there are Italian American communities in Utah, in Iowa, in Florida, in Chicago, in New Orleans, and Mississippi, in San Diego. In Colorado. There's really Italians everywhere. And I think showcasing some of these experiences, we demonstrate to ourselves, we educate ourselves about just how large the Italian American tent is, and that there's room for all of us underneath it. And I'm a lover of knowledge, so just the idea of imparting, sharing this knowledge with others is exciting to me. So there's that. And then there's also, the Los Angeles. Los Angeles is, they say, like one of the most photographed cities in the world, but people are almost entirely ignorant about its origins. If you ask the average person, how did Los Angeles begin? They'll probably, and I've tested this a number of times, they kind of scratch their heads and was it Hollywood? It's like, no, like Los Angeles, it's a lot older than Hollywood. And it's even as a native, we're only taught local history, typically in the 3rd or 4th grade. So we grow up ignorant of our own city. Now, in the American school system, you're going to learn about the history of New York. You're going to learn about Chicago. You might learn about Massachusetts and Lowell Mills and, different parts of the country. But you're not going to learn about Los Angeles, unless you take an advanced class. And so my hope is also to kind of contribute to the scholarship about Los Angeles and helping people, realize just how intricately woven its fabric is, and the many, many voices that, that helped shape it. Yeah.
And for me, as being an Italian born in Italy, I'm very selfish, and I have this insatiable hunger and thirst to learn more about what our ancestors did, because even though we might be 2-3 generations apart and might not be related to those individuals, I feel that every time I dive into publications or as comprehensive and research like yours, it gives me another key to decode who I am. And because I'm an Italian living overseas, we might not call it immigrant because I came with a higher education, and an airplane ticket. And sometimes I would say that unfortunately, often there is a lot of lack of information in Italy about what the experiences have been once that people emigrated, and how those might have differ or have something in common. Also, the appreciation of the fact that the traditions that have been carried out by our fellow immigrant, ancestors have united communities, had become a way of coming together where everything else around them was really foreign. and really appreciate it, even if maybe there might be things that are not done anymore. Although San Rocco, you go to Italy at the same time, and you're going to see processions. I'm
Yeah.
sure Santa Lucia, San Gennaro, and be a little humble and educate again we from Italy about the Italian American experiences. So that's definitely again, might be a selfish quest, but as I said, I definitely love. I have so many years that I need to catch up. Having come here as an adult, so these publications to me are extremely invaluable. So
Thank you for that. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. It's there's been such a great emphasis on STEM, recently in the American educational system. And we've history and the humanities has really suffered as a result. And I feel there's no substitution for experiencing some of these things firsthand, sitting down, talking, participating in these rituals, these traditions. There's just there's so many parts of the world that you can't really experience through a screen. And that's my hope anyway, is to play a role in the preservation of these stories, because without knowing this history, we really don't have a complete picture of our city, of where we came from.
wonderful. So where can people find your publication?
They can find it at any of the big guys, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can also purchase it directly from my website, and that's mariannagatto.com. So Marianna with 2 N's and Gatto with 2 T's, the Italian way. And I'm also, if you'd like an inscription, I'm happy to include that on the obviously the orders placed through the website.
Wonderful. So I wish you the best of luck. I hope that you will be maybe touring and giving presentations and talks throughout.
Dio vole.
And get to see you soon again. And it's always a pleasure to have you. But unfortunately, our time together also today is up. For the Big Ben ha detto stop. And it's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. And we want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. I would like to thank again Marianna Gatto for being with us again. Again, Christmas is approaching. That will be also a great Christmas gift. The Italians Americans of Los Angeles, a history, especially because it will get your family together and maybe come up with new stories of your relatives, your nonni that you didn't know. So it's also a conversation piece. We want to thank our sponsors, Istituto Mondo Italiano and Alla Prima. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. Thank you. Thanks so much.